and welcome to episode number 9 of Studio Sound Doctrine. And I'm your host, Mike Auen, coming to you from my home recording studio and giving you around 600 seconds of biblically sound doctrine. Remember, I love Dr. Pepper Zero Cherry. Just thought I'd mention that. Okay, over the past few episodes, we have talked about the basic principles of proper Bible interpretation. These principles can be found in episodes 6, 7, and 8, so I strongly recommend that you go back and watch those so you can get caught up. One more principle I need to talk about. I have heard people say that because we, the New Testament church, are not under law, but we're under grace, that we can totally ignore the entire Old Testament. So my question is, so I ask, is that correct? Well, allow me to explain how things operated in the Old Testament under the Mosaic Law. After all, we want proper Bible interpretation, right? Okay. The nation of Israel was a theocracy. That means that Israel had no earthly king because God was their king. Now, of course, we know we have Saul and David, etc., and Solomon and those guys later on. But the initial concept was that they would be a theocracy and God would be their one and only king. And his leadership would be delegated through the Levites and the priests. Under this theocracy, God gave to Moses the Mosaic Law at Mount Sinai about 3 months after the Exodus from Egypt, and after the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea. The Mosaic Law consisted of around 613 different rules and regulations. And these 613 laws were broken down into 3 sections. And this is important, so let's get this right. The first section, the sacrificial laws, that part of the Mosaic Law. The sacrificial laws were ordinances of how a person would atone for their sin. They had burnt offerings, they had grain offerings, they had sin offerings, they had animal sacrifices, they had the priesthood and all their garments that they had to wear, they had festivals, etc., etc. So the sacrificial law consisted of all these things, but remember, it involved animal sacrifices. The sacrificial law was fulfilled by Jesus, by his death on the cross and his resurrection from the grave. Hebrews chapter 8 verse 11 tells us this. In speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. The sacrificial law is not repeated for the church in the New Testament. The church no longer concerns itself with the Mosaic sacrificial system. It's been terminated, it's been obsoleted by Jesus. So that's number 1, sacrificial laws. Number 2, the Mosaic Law consisted of civil laws. These civil laws were used to govern the everyday life of the people. Eat this, don't eat this. Wear this, don't wear that. Tithing, how much you should give. Basic governing rules. What to do with your neighbor if he steals your donkey and such rules like that. Now we've got to remember, Israel was a theocracy. The Israelites were to be different and set apart from the other nations. And these civil laws set the Israelites apart from those other pagan nations and their foreign gods. The civil law section was done away with. when Israel ceased being a nation in 70 AD with the destruction of Jerusalem. None of the civil laws are repeated for the church in the New Testament. In the book of Acts, chapter 10, Peter, he's up on a rooftop and he's hungry. And he's dozing off and he has this vision. And verses 12 through 15 of Acts chapter 10 say this. In it, in the vision, were all kinds of animals and reptiles, and birds of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice came to him again a second time. What God has made clean, do not call common. Now, the good news? Hey, we can now eat shrimp. And the only laws concerning what we need to wear or not wear is that we should dress modestly. So, none of the sacrificial or civil laws apply to the New Testament church today. So, sacrificial laws, civil laws, and thirdly, we have moral laws. The Ten Commandments and other laws of how a person should conduct themselves before God, such as sexual immorality, idolatry, sins of divination, of murder, of stealing, sins of the occult, observing the Sabbath, etc. These are all moral laws. And the moral law section of the Mosaic Law transcends the entire Bible. It transcends time itself. You will find moral laws before the law, such as the story of Sodom in Genesis chapter 19. During the law, such as in Leviticus 18. And in the New Testament, such as in Romans chapter 1, 1 Corinthians 6, 1 Timothy chapter 1, and Revelation 21. And since moral laws transcend time, these laws do apply to the New Testament church. There are many Christians today who want to say that we must abide by the Old Testament law. All of it. Just the opposite of those people before who wanted to dismiss it all. But for these people that say we must abide by the Old Testament law, they could be right and they could be wrong, depending on where the issue lies. Is the issue something that lies under the sacrificial system? Does it lie under the civil law? Or is it a moral law? You have to put the issue in the correct category, my friends. So if they say we must go to Jerusalem once a year and sacrifice a lamb to atone for our sins, then they are wrong. That was a sacrificial law which has been done away with. If they say that we cannot eat shellfish, then they are wrong. That was a civil law which has been done away with. If they say homosexuality is a sin, then they are right. That was a moral law, and moral laws transcend time. So, why did I have to bring all this up today? Answer: because knowing this will help us understand the biblical truth about the controversial issue we will get into next week. Well, my friends, that's all for today. The Old Testament sacrificial laws, the civil laws, and the moral laws. And remember, the moral laws transcend time and always apply to the New Testament church. Well, stay tuned for another exciting episode of Studio Sound Doctrine, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. And remember, my friends, the truth isn't always easy, but it does matter, and it will set you free. Well, this is Mike Auen, and I'll see you next time on our next exciting and informative episode of Studio Sound Doctrine.